Franklin wrote about the extraordinary influence of Whitefield's oratory on his hearers. It was wonderful to see the change made in the manners of our inhabitants, he said. It seemed as if all the world was growing religious, so that one could not walk through town in an evening without hearing psalms sung in different families off the street. It's all God, said Whitefield with a characteristic humility. Franklin then offered to publish Whitefield's sermons and make wide distribution. Now the reason I tell you these stories is really important. Up to this time period, 1638, 1640, the Americans were drifting away from the true teachings of the gospel. And these people came along. It's interesting to know that if you read their sermons, every one of them believed that something great was going to happen in the United States. That America had been prepared for something special. They didn't know what, but they knew something was going to happen, and therefore, in order to receive it, whatever it was, they had to have the Spirit of God. And as you know in the Scriptures, where the Spirit of God is also freedom. By the time the shooting started, 1775, the Revolution was over. The Revolution was over in 1770, in fact. John Adams had said that in 1765. The Revolution meaning that the mind process had changed, that they had decided they needed and wanted freedom. That's what it was all about, freedom, independence. And that's what the Declaration of Independence was all about, freedom. Now, the Declaration of Independence, it was written and then announced on July 4, 1776. What you need to know, that contrary to what you may have been taught, that document was actually prepared by three people. Jefferson was the lead. The heart of the document was written by a guy who some people dislike, Thomas Paine. If you read Thomas Paine's writings and then read Jefferson's writings, you'll realize in an instant they're not the same. These are the times that try men's soul, says Thomas Paine. Jefferson would never be so boastful or so loud or outspoken. He's more soft and more moderate. So part of that, I have a letter which Thomas Paine had sent to Jefferson with much of the first two paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence. The rest of the document has to do with their grievances against England. They were delivered by Lee on June 15th before the Continental Congress. He listed all the grievances against King. So Jefferson essentially pulled them together. It was Thomas Paine who provided the real heart of that document. It was Thomas Paine who, I believe, Providence brought to the United States. He, in and of himself, is a miracle, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see. What time is it? Huh? 7:30? 10 more minutes. I only have this much to get through. In 10 minutes, so I'll cut it real short. So in 1775, April 18th, the war started. You know about that. I won't get into that. When Continental Congress met, they decided that they needed someone to head up their continental forces, so they selected George Washington. That was a miracle, in my opinion, because he was selected and he hung out for 8.5 years. He was the Revolutionary War. Without him, we wouldn't have won. Washington, then, on the 15th, he went to Boston on the 29th, headed for Boston, arrived on the 2nd of July, 1775. He immediately recognized he had a problem. He had some 14,000 troops, and they hated each other as much as they hated the English. They were fighting each other, cussing each other. Their facilities weren't the best. Some of them had built houses out of twigs, some of them out of old pieces of wood. It was a mess. Here's what he had. As a matter of fact, of the 14,000, there are nearly 3,000 of those volunteers who didn't even have a gun. They didn't have a musket. And some of them that had muskets were rusty old hunting weapons that were useless. In fact, a musket, take a Brown Bess for example, had a range of about 80 yards. At 80 yards, that's about up to where the top of the hill is, you wouldn't aim, you just point your gun in general direction and pray it might hit something. They weren't too accurate. They really weren't. But the Americans had a secret weapon which the British hated. It was a Kentucky rifle. Those guys from the mountain could shoot a squirrel out of a tree at 200 and sometimes 300 yards. And that was something the British soon learned to fear. So anyway, Washington finally got the place organized. Now his frustration set in. He didn't have guns, he didn't have ammunition, he didn't have any cannons. Now the British, through a period of from 1765 to 1775, had constantly built up the troops in Boston. They had a series of ships on the water side, some of them as many as 60 cannons, some with 20 cannons, and so they protected the water side, and the Americans had the inside or the land side, the hills where Bunker Hill, Breed Hill, the rest of them were. Washington couldn't do a darn thing. He didn't have the ammunition, powder, guns, or anything to do anything about it. So he was nervous. He was afraid that the British would find out and attack him because he wasn't prepared. On the other hand, Admiral Howe was concerned that they might start something and might get their butts kicked again, like they did when they went to Concord and Lexington and Bunker Hill. So he was reticent. So he was waiting for more troops and more ships. Now, Lord Washington was really a brave, smart guy. He was really a good statistician. So what he decided to do, he worked out a little plan where he was going to capture Boston. So what he needed was cannons. So there was a young 25-year-old man, 6'2", 300 pounds. He had made a good fullback. He ran a bookstore. His name was Henry Knox. Henry Knox had studied everything he gets his hands on relative to artillery. And so Washington liked this young man and appointed him to be the commander of his artillery. When Knox said, great, I'll do it, he was a major, he made him a colonel. He said, where's the artillery and I'll get it organized? Well, Washington said, I don't have it. You're going to have to figure out how to get it. So Henry Knox had found out that Arnold and Hall in May 15th thereabouts, had gone up to Fort Ticonderoga, had captured Fort Ticonderoga, and there were literally hundreds of cannons there. We're in November 27th. So Knox went to the War Council, that was 8 officers, 6 generals from Washington, to brief him on his idea. He'd go up the 300 miles to Fort Ticonderoga, get the cannons and bring them back. So he goes before this War Council, says, okay, here's what I want to do. We're going to go up this 300 miles and get the cannons and bring it back. Every single officer said, Henry, you're nuts. This is November. You get snow and ice up there right now. There's mountains you've got to cross, there are no roads. In addition, you're going to have to cross the Hudson twice, you're going to have to cross other rivers. Besides that, you go travel on the lake. Where are you going to get the oxen, the horses? Where are you going to get the ships to do all this? Besides, you know, you're going to have snow and sub-zero temperatures. Henry, you can't do it. This is the craziest thing we've ever heard. So he went around the room. Every single officer said, Henry, it's impossible. Don't even think about it. Henry said, I'm thinking about it. I'm going to do it. So it came around to Washington. Now, Washington was much like my old boss, President Reagan. The cabinet would brief him on an issue, like if you had a national security issue, it'd be the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Director of the CIA, and the National Security Advisor, and a couple experts said, sit around the conference room and brief the President. The President would sit there not saying a word, his head bowed with a pencil, taking meticulous notes. Each one of them would tell their ideas and plans. Reagan would listen, then he'd say, okay, this is what we're going to do. That's exactly what Washington did. He listened to all of them, and what he said, Henry, go do it. We need those cannons. All the generals shook his head and said, this is nuts. It isn't going to work. Well, Henry left, him and his brother. His brother was 19 years old. His name was Will. So the two of them with a pack mule took off for Fort Ticonderoga. We're going to leave that story a minute. A month before that happened, Washington didn't have a navy. Didn't have anything. But the British had a navy. He had to have some way to equalize them. What he did have, however, was some incredible fishermen from Marblehead, Massachusetts. These guys were the most incredible fishermen. They could go anywhere at any time and do a masterful job of catching fish. So he decided, incidentally, I learned this early on when I was working for a company, in business, or anything else for that matter, you have real authority where somebody says, you have this authority, you're delegated this authority, or you have assumed authority. You make people think you have the authority. Washington didn't have approval to start a Navy, but he assumed the authority, and he called some more intelligence and said, I want to build 6 ships. We want to convert 6 of these fishing boats into privateers, and I want you to go get me some supplies. Well, the British were sending in transport ships, supply ships from England to support the troops in Boston, okay? The first day that a ship went out on these little converted fishing boats, talk about a miracle.